All right, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Happy last week of summer break. And I know for most of us, that means we're back in classrooms getting things ready to go. And I'm seeing some really nice setups and smart boards behind me. All right. So we are going to go ahead and get started with our land acknowledgement this morning. And we acknowledge that ONLIT's work takes place on the traditional Indigenous territories. We acknowledge that there are 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territory now called Ontario. We are thankful to be able to work on this land. We are thankful to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people for their care for and teachings about the earth. This acknowledgement reminds us of our responsibilities to our relationships and to the ancestral lands on which we learn, work, and live. So welcome to our session this morning, and we are in our last morning session before school starts, which is exciting and a little sad all at the same time, although it does feel a lot like sweater weather today where I am. It's quite chilly. So we are meeting today from 9 to 10. After this, we are moving to evening sessions. So we are moving to the 7:30 to 8:30 every second Wednesday to cover fluency, reading comprehension, vocab, and then bringing it all together. Those dates are up there. You will get reminders, and hopefully I see you when we get back and we've got some good questions. And hopefully today we can get some good stuff going to get you started with the phonics. To access the previous recordings, they are all available through, I believe, MJ can correct me if I'm wrong, the ONlit YouTube channel. So if you go through there, you can take a look at the past recordings. We also send them all out, so they're there. And MJ's got my face on the ads now. It's quite entertaining to take a look at me in mid-sentence frozen on the screen. So this morning structure, we are going to go through 2 interactive tasks this morning because phonics is kind of a big one. And we do want to give you some stuff that you can use with your students. So I'm going to share a lot of stuff. MJ is going to share it all in the chat. So we're going to start right away. Then we're going to move into one task. We're going to chat a little more, do another task, and then come back for our big finish. And of course, we have a prize because we have a prize every week. And this week, we are going to share with you the art and science of teaching primary reading from Christopher Such. So MJ will draw that at the end. So let's get started with chapter 4. And as we explore this chapter, we're going to continue to see ourselves in our multiple varied roles as problem solvers. We're on this journey, and I feel like we've got a little bit of urgency now, not just in all the new things that we're learning, but also in that we're right about to meet our new students. So we want to go as fast as we can, but we also need to remember to take it slow and to get to know our students and who they are and what their needs are. In this chapter, the authors are going to take us through in a really clear and accessible manner the what and the why of phonics, as well as how to access and teach it depending on where students are in the development of their phonics skills. And I just want to give a shout out if you are a French immersion or a Français teacher, Sonographe is now available through Greater Essex. And we are going to take a look at that during the French session today if you want to pop back and join us for that. Otherwise, take a look through, it's all over Facebook right now. So back to this is a great quote from the text. And we use the word linchpin here. And I think that's a really great word because it helps us to think about phonics as the something that holds the various elements of a complicated structure together, or something that holds together parts that exist or function as a unit. And the authors describe or define phonics really simply on page 83 as the application of sounds to letters to decode a word. We've got another quote here, and this one's from the Ontario Human Rights Commission, and that's from the Right to Read report. That was the province-wide inquiry in Ontario, so I do know we have a few people from outside of Ontario, but this happened here in Ontario. And it led to a report that focused on the foundational word-level reading skills. They are by no means implying a phonics-only approach to early reading instruction, but stressing the necessity of a strong phonics program in order to build a solid foundation as one part of an effective evidence-based literacy program. So if we stop to really think about phonics instruction in our classes in the past, many of us taught phonics in some form or another. And what was often missing was what research is now providing us. And that is the guidelines on how we optimize that instruction. So guidelines around how we can best teach this critical piece of the whole. We need to make sure we are teaching phonics early and effectively and explicitly and systematically to prevent reading failure. And we also know that it is much more difficult to provide decoding intervention to older struggling readers than it is to just teach our younger students correctly right away. So let's move into our first key takeaway on that note. And key takeaway 1 says, research has not endorsed one sequence for phonics instruction over another as being more effective. Most importantly, a sequence should be followed and applied. So there are several out there, several different scopes and sequences in terms of what we teach in what order. Most really do resemble one another. Some are quite different because their focus is different. So, for example, something like Handwriting Without Tears is arranged around facility of printing letters and not reading. So their scope and sequence is going to look a little bit different. What research has determined does matter is that there is a scope and sequence being followed, and that that sequence makes sense. So this is to ensure that learning is systematic and progressive, and so that the skills build on one another over time. So it's cumulative. And while there's no one scope or sequence, we do have guiding principles with regards to the introduction of letter sounds. So when we think about consonants that are easy to discriminate visually and auditorily, that are used frequently and that are continuants, we tend to pull them in first. We then introduce a few vowels, typically A and O, because they're easy to discriminate. And when we add those vowels, we are then able to begin blending and segmenting real words as soon as possible. And that's the goal, right? Is to begin practicing as early as possible. We would then gradually start to add more consonants and vowels with lots of practice, and we're practicing right away. We're not waiting until we've done the entire alphabet. We're practicing as soon as we can start blending those together. Once we've done this, we move into our digraphs, and that's the 2 letters that make one sound, and then on from there. So if you take a look at page 106, you can see a lot more detail there. I'm sure most of you have heard of UFly at this point. If not, I strongly encourage you to take a look. And we are going to send you a link a little bit later to the podcast with Holly Lane. And what she says about UFly about blends, meaning 2 or 3 consonants together that still make their individual sounds. For example, in the word blend, the blend, make 2 sounds, place, street. Holly Lane tells us that rather than teaching that blend as one unit, we want to teach our students to blend those consonants together. If we teach these consonant combinations as one sound, we're just adding more cognitive load to our students, and they have to learn even more pieces of the code. For me personally, I would have said that I absolutely teach phonics, but now I recognize that I was probably not following best practice in the past. I definitely was not. I was following a 1 sound per week scope and sequence for the longest time, usually introducing some kind of poem that highlighted that sound, but wasn't controlled for all the sounds that I'd previously taught. In French immersion, I spent a lot of time teaching 1 vowel per week before hitting any consonants, so it just took too long. I often got bored way sooner than anybody else, and I didn't get to that decoding as quickly as I needed to. Like, we need to get into that practicing, that blending, putting those sounds together right away into reading. Definitely didn't get to encoding, to writing any real words for a long time. I didn't understand how to teach spelling, and I'd never even heard of the term encoding at that point. So we've come a long way. There's still learning going on, but take a look at what you've got for a scope and sequence. There is some research out there that does say to pick one, to stick with it, and it works really well if everyone in the school is working with the same general scope and sequence. So in key takeaway 2, and we've emphasized this a few times now, and if you are a primary teacher or a CERT, you know the value, the importance of practice. Our students need multiple opportunities to practice. We also know that the practice needs to be in context, and this is where decodables come in. So decodables provide an opportunity for this practice in a manner that is controlled for what has been taught. So note that line, for what has been taught, controlled for what has been taught. A text, it doesn't have to be a book necessarily. A text is only decodable if we've taught our students the code. So if we've taught all of the phonemes, all of the sounds, and all of the graphemes, all of the letters that are present in the text. Just because a publisher names a set of books as decodable, if you haven't followed their scope and sequence in your structured literacy teaching, those texts are not actually decodable for your students. So in order for a text to be decodable for your students, you need to have taught them all of those letters and sounds before. If you are using UFly, you have access to the UFly decodable texts. Those are decodable because they are what you have taught. There are a lot of other publishers out there. There is a link on UFly that shows you how those line up if you are using UFly and another set of books. Lots on their website. So going back to that discussion about decodables, we know that decodables are for the short term. We want to get in and get out as quickly as possible. Once students crack the code, they can read widely, but in the beginning, we need those decodable books in order to increase reading comprehension in the long term. It's important to note that decodables are meant for a specific purpose. They're like training wheels on a bike. Decodables support practice in applying those skills until our students can do that without scaffolds. They are not meant to be used forever. They remove the possibility of developing those compensatory strategies, such as guessing, which we know are the strategies that poor readers use. And we also need to remember, and the authors state this, that decodables provide a successful reading experience for our students. Think back about, we had a discussion about what brings joy and motivation to our students. They want to feel they can do something. They want to be successful. Then they want to do it more. Decodable texts really open that door for this successful reading experience to take place. And this is a great time to share. This is a resource. It's not new anymore, but it's a resource alert from ONLIT's resource library that's available, and MJ has put the link in the chat for you. Thanks to Laura Bross and Avon Maitland District School Board for their generosity in sharing this awesome resource. It is aligned with UFly, can be used to support building automaticity at the word level and provide targeted practice. And these are some fluency grids. So those are available to you on the ONLIT site, all free for you. All right, so we are going to hop into an interactive task right away. We are going to start by just kind of going over our breakout room norms, contributing to the conversation, remembering we are turning off the recording. We're going to pause while you chat, give you a little more time to work together on this one today. Take up space. Remember that others need space too. Be cognizant of different experiences, engage critically with the content, and know that growing and learning means that you may shift your positions, revisit your assumptions, and advance your thinking. So we are going to share a link to a slide deck. And this is what you're going to work on in your breakout rooms, because I thought this might be really useful for you to kind of wrap your head around as you're getting ready to go back into the classroom. We need to be careful what we're asking beginning readers to read and spell or decode and encode. And we need to keep that in mind with what phonics we have taught and which words we're then choosing for instruction. So like I said, a text is only decodable if we have taught the code. So what you're going to work through together is generating 10 words for decoding or encoding instruction, as well as 2 sentences based on what is indicated as having been taught. So if you look up on the slide, you have taught short A, not nasal A, M, S, T, P, F, short I, and N. You've taught blending and segmenting of 3 sounds, and you've taught the heart words the, is, and said. So keeping in mind those implications for reading and writing instruction, if the student has been taught all of these things, then they would be able to work with the words pat, sip, and fit, for example. However, this same child would not be expected to be successful with the words pan, which has that nasalized A sound, which is tricky, time, which has that silent E at the end, right? And cast, because we're not there yet. So we're going to share the link to the slide deck. You're going to go to a page, whatever breakout room number you're in. So if you're in breakout room 3, you're going to go to page 3, and you're going to work together to generate 10 words. So you want to aim towards those green type words. You're going to create that list. You're going to create those 2 sentences. Yeah, and we should be good to go. So make sure before you go into your breakout rooms, you do open that Google Slide link so that you're able to work with that. Okay, I think we're just about all back. So hopefully engaging in that exercise was valuable in helping you think about what needs to be considered when planning words for phonics instruction. Cast did not work. Right, that was just an example more of the CVCC pattern, the cast word, not because of just the C, but yeah, you're right. It also wouldn't work because you haven't taught the C. Good call. So this is a good reminder, and I remember it being a big aha for me, is that what a student is able to read and write is limited by their phonemic awareness level as well as by their phonics. If we are asking our students to read words that we haven't actually taught them the skills for, we're implicitly telling them that reading is a guessing game, which we all know that it's not. So hopefully that helped you wrap your head around some things for this year. So let's dig a little deeper into chapter 4. Just a reminder to please turn off your microphones if you're just working your way in. And yes, this emphasizes why following a program with controlled sentences and text is such a time saver. It does it all for you. So our next key takeaway here falls under the heading of teaching morphology is phonics instruction 2. When our students are in the consolidated phase of Aries phases, which we're going to take a look at next, sound by sound decoding is replaced with fast recognition of syllables and morphemes to read new words. So our students are now recognizing larger parts of words as wholes. And this quote, advanced phonics embraces word analysis beyond the correspondences of phoneme and grapheme to include syllables and meaningful chunks of words, morphemes. So as educators, we tend to think that phonics instruction is over once our students have learned that basic decoding skill. And the authors explain that while the content of basic phonics usually ends around grade 3, that we need to move on to those advanced phonics from grade 4 into high school. In fact, they state that once students have mastered the basic set of grapheme spellings, we strongly advise that advanced phonics then becomes the target. So research shows us that teaching advanced phonics or morphology is really invaluable because it contributes to improved word recognition and then to that spelling, to that writing, to that comprehension. That awareness of morphology, that morphological awareness, it affects our phonemic awareness, our orthographic skills, and our vocabulary skills. So the authors made a really great point that resonated with me here, and that is, I think it's probably true for a lot of us, that we do not feel as comfortable with teaching morphology. And now that we've had this curriculum for a year, maybe we're getting to the point where we're playing around a little bit more with it. But I know it was really new. And just like encoding, the word morphology was pretty new to me before getting into this journey. Page 116 is going to give you some suggestions on how you might take a look at this if you're feeling, a little less comfortable. It's a great less is more approach. So if you only use these suggestions, you'll be all set. So that's page 116 again. It's also important to keep in mind that all of this is in our new language curriculum and to take a look at that Appendix A, that continuum. That gives us a really good breakdown of what to teach when. So here's an interesting quote for us. Every word wants to grow up to be a sight word. We support our students in developing their sight word vocabulary and teaching them phonics at the grapheme phoneme correspondence level and also at the level of morphological awareness. This is how we support automatic word level reading or word recognition so that it becomes automatized and frees up cognitive space for comprehension. There's a lot of confusion in education around the term sight words. So that's why this quote is here. Every word wants to grow up to be a sight word. When we keep in mind that we are thinking about structured literacy here, any word that is recognized automatically is a sight word. Whether that's a high frequency word, whether that's on a list, any word that we recognize automatically becomes a sight word. So that could be those words on those high frequency, low frequency lists. It could be regular or irregular words, any word that can be read by sight, and that is not sounding it out every time. So we're not talking about memorizing a list of words here. So how does a word become a sight word? And this key takeaway is the process by which words are stored as whole units so that they can be recognized automatically when reading and spelled accurately when writing. If you think about your own reading, you're not sounding out every word as you go along. You do have that sight recognition. We know that decoding or sounding out a word is a key goal for our beginning readers. Over time and over many repeated exposures to a word, and that number of times varies amongst children, decoding is automatized. Students recognize those words effortlessly and automatically. And when that word is instantly recognized and stored for permanent, effortless retrieval, we can say that the word has become orthographically mapped. We're going to talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. That was another new one for me. This, in turn, when we orthographically map a word, it allows our students to read fluently since they aren't having to read words sound by sound. Once that reading is fluent, meaning it's accurate, it's at a good rate, it's expressive, the cognitive skills then can focus on meaning instead of the nuts and bolts of decoding. The authors call orthographic mapping the superhighway that allows instant word recognition and access to meaning. It helps teachers to know what to assess and what needs to be taught to build the necessary support systems for automatic word reading. And MJ is going to share a link to Lynn Stone's video about how a word becomes a sight word. Just a heads up, it's tricky. It's a complicated video. And it's sometimes helpful to watch and listen to things a few times to really let it sink in a little bit deeper. And this is one that took me a couple of tries. So if it's a lot the first time, just know that you may need to listen to it a couple of times. I certainly did. So this concept of orthographic mapping, and this is a good visual to help us wrap our minds around this concept. When a word is orthographically mapped, its graphemes, phonemes, and meanings are all bonded together. So this allows for that effortless automatic recognition of the word and a mental orthographic representation for spelling. So page 84 and 85, the authors go into greater detail about what this looks like in the brain. But essentially, we see letter strings. So the input is visual. Each grapheme is attached or linked to its corresponding phoneme, its sound. That triggers the meaning of what is it? What is a sheep, a white fluffy animal? And for words with multiple meanings, context comes in to help us determine which meaning of the word we need in that specific context. For step 3, for that triggers the meaning of what is a sheep. For our kiddos, for our students that are MLL or French immersion, we need to keep in mind, we need to consider that additional instruction in that tier 1 vocabulary. Our students that are learning in an additional language often decode letter strings and read the words, but a lot of the time have no idea what that means. So we're going to look at that a little bit more in our final session together, but just keep that in mind, that vocabulary piece, and that what is a tier 1 word is going to be a little bit different for our additional language learners. We know that decoding or sounding out a word is a key goal in order for a beginning reader to develop their sight vocabulary. And in order to do this, students need to know the link between the letters and the sounds, the phonics, and they need to be able to work with those sounds, the phonemic awareness. So as a reminder, phonemic awareness, we did that last week, involves processing each individual sound, while phonics involves linking those sounds to print. They're distinct skills, but there's a lot of overlap there, and we need both to develop decoding skills and to eventually develop comprehension. Orthographic mapping is also reflected in our new language curriculum, as well as in a document that we're going to share here in the chat that came out pre-curriculum, sort of in that time between the Right to Read report coming out and the curriculum coming out. So orthographic mapping is reflected in our new language curriculum, as well as in this effective early reading instruction, a teacher's guide. All right, so we're going to move back into breakout rooms for about 10 minutes before we chat at the end. And we're going to take a look at the same piece of writing that we looked at last week. And the second point and key takeaway 4 told us that in addition to phonemic awareness screening measurements such as for sound fluency and phoneme segmentation fluency, spelling samples also give us that insight. So this is going to be our next step, and we are going to talk about what do we notice about this child's phonics and what are your instructional next steps. So last week we looked at this exact same piece of writing. We talked about phonemic awareness. I will share this to your breakout rooms. You'll have 10 minutes to talk about phonics and maybe even think back a little bit to last week and what you talked about with phonemic awareness, and are there differences? What's the same? What's different? What are you noticing? If you are done going through all of that, you can take a look at the activities on page 121 to 129 and see what you might use with this student. All right, so we've only got about 8 minutes left together, so we're just going to go through this quickly. In addition to some of the phoneme awareness stuff that we talked about last week, we might want to focus on some of the following phonics concepts with this kiddo here. Maybe some short vowel review. So if we're looking at the word back, spelled with the short E, but spelled with the short O, the suffix ED, we're going to take a look at that. We're going to look at maybe some open syllables, some irregular words like said, and looking at those VCE patterns, the chem, the came, the home in there. So before we go, we do want to take a look at the phases of word reading development. And it was Dr. Lene Airy that coined the term orthographic mapping and also developed an influential phase model, which really conceptualizes word reading development into 4 phases that were unpacked in this chapter. We know from our work that children pass through predictable phases as they develop word recognition skills. And these phases depend upon student acquisition of phonemic awareness, of letter knowledge, and that grapheme-phoneme relationship. These phases are not stages because there's not a defined boundary. It's like overlapping waves, and that's why we've got that wave image up there. So why is this important? Because knowing where a student is can help us make instructional decisions and know where to place that emphasis. So table 4.1 outlines each phase and the corresponding instruction. And generally it tells us that in that pre-alphabetic phase, students do not know letters or have any phoneme awareness, and they are often pretend reading. Once they get into that early partial alphabetic phase, they are developing phonemic awareness with first and last sound, not usually there yet with the middle sound. Once we hit that full alphabetic phase, we're getting those waves a little bit bigger. They can fully segment words. They can read a lot. Their spelling is more complete, and they are forming a larger sight vocabulary. And then when we hit that consolidated phase, this is where our students can decode by syllable and morpheme, and they have quick and accurate word reading. So when we look at it in terms of the chart, the authors present us with assessment options for each phase. So page 92 outlines the steps for assessing and teaching letter recognition when students are in the pre-alphabetic phase. Page 91 gives us a series of questions to guide how nonsense word fluency assessments can help with planning instruction. Closely looking at the response patterns can give us information to pinpoint instruction. And pages 102 to 104 go through other phonics diagnostics that can provide information for targeted instruction with specific grapheme-phoneme correspondences, or the ability to decode multisyllabic words and how to administer and score those assessments. So lots to throw at you just at the end there, but we are going to come back, as we do at the end of every chapter, looking at that framework for the lesson plan that makes up the acronym STEPS, the setup, teach, engage, practice activity, and show you know. And at the end of the chapter, you're going to find a sample scripted lesson for phonics based on this framework. It's planned out for a group of grade 2 students who scored below benchmark on nonsense word fluency assessment. There's also a bank of phonics activities. And the authors do remind us that the practice activities they provide in the ending pages need to always be delivered with the structured literacy elements that ensure success. That is, they are intense, they are systematic, and they are explicit. So on that, MJ, who's our winner today?
Our winner today is Elisa Armstrong. Elisa, congratulations, you won the book. So please send us your email address, your mailing address to info@onlit.org, and we will send you the book as soon as possible. Congratulations.
And just to remind you, the recordings are all available in YouTube. If you are signed up, you will get a link to the recording as well as a link to all of the links that we shared through the session today. MJ has posted the link to the ONlit YouTube into the chat. And as a reminder that we are taking a 2-week break so that you can get back to school, because I'm, as much as I love to see you, sure that you do not want to see me in the evenings on your first week back at school. So I will see you in 2 weeks, Wednesday, September 11th at 7:30 p.m. And we are going to dig into fluency. So hope to see you then. I will stick around for a little bit. We'll turn off the recording if you want to chat. And otherwise, I'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a great back to school. Bonne rentrée. Good luck.